All right, so we're recording. Like I said, I would assume that our Attorney General rep will be popping in here since we are meeting, even though it's an informal meeting. So if we want to just give it another minute, see if anybody files in, and then we can just jump into the Q&A.
Yeah, I was looking on the site just to see if there was an easy button to find this. I think Nicole's right.
An easy button to find what?
The meetings, right?
Yeah, the link, once you said what it was, I found it, but I kind of felt like it should be down in that box that said meetings, or I don't know. Maybe if it had been highlighted in yellow, like you said, it'd be easier to access, but I'm at work, and so I'm signed in under the work email here, and then the board email is a whole different thing, so getting to that calendar invite, it was kind of process.
Okay. Are you talking about on the main Public Utilities Commission site at the bottom where it's a calendar of things that are happening?
No, I'm talking about that towing task force page.
Okay.
So when you're looking at it in the lower left-hand, there's kind of a blue bar towards the bottom, and it's got the meetings, and then next to it, it's got like the minutes, and that's where I was looking for this meeting and it kind of expecting it to be. When you said it was at the top, I did find it, but if it was maybe highlighted in yellow or something and more, hey, look at me, I would have noticed it. But I looked right past that when I was looking for the, you see where I'm coming from.
Well, yeah, and like I said, the other notices that we've put here have had that highlight, that yellow, and it says notice, and it's like in bold, and then it's got all the language there. So like I said, I'm not sure why that didn't happen this time, but I'll talk to the people in my office who upload these notices when I ask them to, and I'll make sure they do that from now on. Because again, I do feel like it's more prominent. It's like one of the first things you see. I mean, your eyes are just attracted to the highlighted portion of any page. So I think that's why people see it. And again, it has the date, it's got the time, it's got link to the direct link to this meeting. It's got a link to the sign up form. It's got my email information if they want to reach out to me and ask some additional questions. So I think our notices are working pretty well. I have had people reach out to me, I think because of those notices. But yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, yeah, it's 2:05. Like I said, people might start filing in. It's again, this is kind of an informal meeting. So I mean, it's just really to get ahead of our next meeting is how I've looked at it, where people who just don't know as much about the towing industry can ask those of us who do. And, if you have any questions about, the current regs, the current, anything really, just so you can get a better feel for the towing industry and how it currently works and how it got to where it is now. I think that's kind of what this meeting was for.
Absolutely. I just got off the phone talking with Officer in Rango that was needed info on how things worked and some different languages and stuff and why fours and how it comes. So anybody got anything, fire away up, put it at me.
Yeah, and I'm here from the PUC's perspective as well, in regards to the regs that are on the book, kind of how they got that way, how we enforce it, all that kind of stuff. That's what I'm here for.
I don't want to be selfish, but since it seems like we have the capacity in this conversation, I'll ask. Since I wasn't able to make the last meeting, can I just ask what happened to the request for the towing bill sponsor to engage with us? And I guess what are like high level updates?
So I'll just give a quick update on that. So we had a larger conversation with, again, our new Attorney General representative. He's the one who kind of gives us as a group legal advice as to what we're doing and our role and making sure we're not kind of stepping outside our lane, so to speak. As well as the director of the PUC, my boss's boss, he was here as well, kind of explaining. He actually used to be a member of the legislature, so he knows quite a bit about the process and all that. But anyway, essentially, we had a pretty thorough discussion, and feel free, the recording of that meeting is up if you want to go and watch it.
Okay,
It is
yeah,
up on the website
I didn't realize
if
that.
that's easier. Yeah, it was a pretty in-depth conversation. Ultimately, the conclusion was that we weren't going to send that letter. We basically tabled it for now. Was kind of the end result. But yeah, if you want to look at, well, the minutes aren't up yet because we have to approve them during our next meeting.
Right.
But yeah, you can look at just watch that recording, or it was one of the first things we talked about. So if you just want to listen to that portion, or I would really encourage anybody who doesn't attend meetings to watch the recordings, because they will all be there. Sometimes it takes me, a week to get it up. But it does ultimately get there, and it's something you could watch. And given how much time we have between meetings, I think it should be plenty of time to just look at it, listen to it, and kind of see that. And then once the minutes get pre-circulated for approval, then you can kind of compare that, or all that. But yeah, no, I would encourage people to do that, if especially if you don't have someone who's standing in for you during the meeting.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the consensus was it was out of our wheelhouse, and we shouldn't get involved until it is in our wheelhouse. That was the quick, easy thought that I had.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So any towing questions? I'm curious what y'all think. I mean, again, I know during the last meeting, I encouraged everybody before our next meeting to look at our rules, the 6,500 series of rules under the PUC. If you wanted to look at part 6 of 4010.1, the state statutes, there's not a lot in there right now. Most of towing operations and stuff is handled actually in our rules. The statutes more give the PUC kind of a very broad directive to come up with rules that are appropriate for the towing industry in Colorado. And then obviously the primer that was sent out prior to one of our earlier meetings, that's kind of a good historical resource to look at and read in regards to that. And again, this is all on the website. I try to make sure all the pre-circulated materials are on there under like the agenda and minutes. That just links you to essentially a folder, which then includes like some of those pre-circulated items. I've tried to label them as common sense as I can if you ever want to look at that.
Nate, this is Joyanne. Can you guys hear me? I'm calling in from my car. Okay,
Yeah.
Thanks. So I'll be in my car for the next few minutes headed home. Is it okay for us to ask questions? Because I'm glad John is here, because I had a question for John.
Jump on in.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So so you have touched on like rates and rules and regs, like as it relates to like law enforcement and towing and those contracts. And I was wondering if you could give us like a primer on like how we came to the rates we have. How does that work? I felt like I was under the impression that it's like its own bucket, its own category, right? And so I would just be, it's an open question, but I would be interested in learning more about that aspect.
Yeah.
And I think you're our resident expert.
Yes. I just went through this like really a half hour ago. And the biggest question I have that always comes to me is, why is consent towing cheaper than non-consent towing? That's like the hugest, no one understands that. And so here's where it goes into different styles of structure. So when you're talking consent towing, I'm not required as a tower to have a facility. I don't have to have insurance for a facility. I don't have to have people to man the facility. I don't have to have people manning the trucks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it's consent. I can work pretty much whenever I want to work. If someone calls and breaks down, I can say, sure, I can get to you right now, or you know what, I can get to you tomorrow, or I can pretty much work within my own bounds, right? That's a consent side. And the non-consent side, I have to man my trucks differently. So if I'm in private property, depends on what I'm doing in my private property towing. Do I have to man the trucks 24 hours a day to tow from fire lanes and handicap spots at a moment's notice? Things like that. I also have to have a facility, and I got to be able to, put insurance on that facility and things like that. And then law enforcement is another realm, right? So in private property, you look at, it's pretty basic. You go to a property and the vehicle is normally in a parking space. Very rarely do you find the vehicle in the apartment building or on top of the apartment building or in the tree or a bunch of investigation that needs to happen. It's pretty straightforward. So private property rates are set on a flat rate of the cost of a tower to go to a parking lot, hook up a vehicle, take it to the impound facility, and process it with storage and paperwork fees and notifications and stuff like that. So that's why it's a flat rate. Law enforcement is an hourly rate, because in law enforcement, it's God only knows what. It could be in the house, it could be in the river, it could be on the highway, it could be a fatality, to where there's investigation. So you might get the tow. The law enforcement says, all right, we need you here at this location. You get there and then do nothing, waiting for them to do investigations. Or you get there and it's down the mountainside in the river. And you have winching that you're doing for hours on end, or there's so much things that go on with law enforcement. That's why law enforcement is set on an hourly rate. So that's the reasons why you have a flat rate in private property and you have an hourly rate in law enforcement. Now, as far as
can I ask a follow? I mean, I want you to keep going, but can I ask a follow up to what you just said?
Yes.
So if there's like an accident or like if a car is evidence or something, or you have to tow it away, whatever, like then the person, like when a person is finally able to get their vehicle, they pay the bill, correct?
Correct.
And I'm not saying that's your fault. I just wanted to make sure that was that, that's on the industry fault. But okay. And then I have never had my car towed by law enforcement, thankfully. So I don't know what this is like, but if my car were to ever be towed, then I pay, then how is that rate set if it was you know what I mean? If
it's the same rate. So on law enforcement, you would have your hourly rate, and in general, the owner of the vehicle pays the towing fees, whatever that rate was. So if it was a simple tow, that was a crash site, like your typical crash sites, two people crash, let's say you crashed, you end up going to the hospital. The law enforcement will then have your car towed to the impound lot and towed for safekeeping until you can get your insurance company out to deal with it, and the insurance company will pay the bill. Or let's say it's drivable and you could just drive it out, then you could pay the bill. But someone has to pay the bill before it's released from the impound. That's how the tower makes their money, and that's how they pay for the service.
Sure. But okay, so 100% of that cost is then passed through. So it is the car owner that pays. Like law enforcement doesn't pick up any part of that tab for you doing the service.
No.
Got it. Okay.
The only time law enforcement will pick up a tab is if they did something in error. So there'll be times where an officer tows a car by mistake, and they call up and say, hey, we messed up. We're going to take care of the bill. Go ahead and release it to the owner free of charge. And we say, okay. There's goodwill that you can do from the tower side. Like a lot of times, recovered steals, for instance, someone gets their car stolen. It gets recovered by a law enforcement agency. They have the tower come out, tow it to the yard. And then, a couple days later, the owners finally notified that they recovered their stolen vehicle. And now the owners have this tow bill. They got their car stolen, and now they have a tow bill they got to pay to get their own car back. And that's a real sore spot for towers like me, where you go, geez, that sucks, because you're a victim and now you're a victim again, right? So, we take and drop storage fees for those types of customers just to kind of help them out. It's still a sore spot because it's still $175 or $200 for them to get their own stolen car back. So, I mean, it still sucks for them.
Wow.
We were trying to get legislation passed to in like a victims assistance fund to help with that. But it always dies because it has a fiscal note. Now the city and county of Denver does that. If your car's stolen in Denver and recovered in Denver, you don't pay any tow fees, and the sheriff's office takes care of the tower on it. But not all cities are like Denver. Not everybody does that. So,
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, that would really be a bummer to have your vehicle stolen, and then, well, we found it, particularly if it's 1 or 2 weeks later.
right.
So yeah, I interrupted your explanation to ask a follow-up, but continue on, and thank you for filling me in on the background there.
Yeah, no worries. So then you have, so when you start talking about the pricing, and then you go, okay, look at the expense that a tow carrier has when he does non-consent towing. So I'm going to just leave law enforcement on the board here. We're talking strictly law enforcement. So, because I deal with this daily, I deal with 13 law enforcement agencies. So you have your man in the truck 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You have to be on scene within 20 minutes. Otherwise, you could be fined up to $1,000 for missing the call. So you have huge responsibility when you're towing for law enforcement. So I have to man those trucks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. On a side note, we started business in 1973, and we have never shut up our doors for one single hour since then. It's probably cool, huh? But anyway, so going back to that, so you got your facility now. So you have to have your facility, your people that man that facility, which is all overhead. Now, there's no guarantee that you're going to tow X amount of calls per hour. There's no guarantee when people are going to crash or when law enforcement's going to call. So you're literally flying by the seat of your pants when you're doing non-consensual law enforcement to say, how much money are you going to make? Well, you don't know, because this month we may tow 200 calls and next month tow 50 calls, right? But still have the same overhead that you have every month and every day. Then you have to look at the loss. So you got to think. Currently, right now, I bring in anywhere from 350 to 400 tows a month for law enforcement. Approximately 200 of those are never picked up, which means I have to dispose of them. So I may recover, if I'm lucky, an eighth to a quarter of what I have into those jobs. So I have a 0.75% loss right off the bat on almost 50% of that income. Then you can compound that when you do things like a motorhome. So right now, when I have an abandoned motorhome, I tow it in. I don't get paid for my truck or my drivers or my facility or anything. And then to process it takes me 30 to 45 days that I have to insure it and store it. And then at the end of it, when I go to disperse of it, it's costing me anywhere from $1,200 to $1,400 to dispose of those. So not only am I losing, I'm also paying money out. See, the government doesn't take care of that. It's no different than when you get into like truck crashes. You'll see these on I-70. Here a while back, I-70 in Denver West. Truck came down, hit a bunch of trucks, made a big fire. It was a disaster. People died. You probably saw that on the news. Do you know that to this day, almost 2 years later, none of the towers were paid on any of that? I was one of 3 towers that worked that site that sift through burnt rubbish looking for bodies for almost 12 hours, cleaning that mess up. None of us got paid a single dollar for that.
And so not even like the the owner of the truck is responsible?
Nope. No, and then the problem is the only people that got paid were my employees. My employees got paid because I got to pay them. Otherwise, the labor board would be way up my butt. But as far as the companies go, none of the tow companies got paid for that. The lucky tower was Ace Towing out of Lakewood, because it was a Lakewood police that handled that. His storage facility is where everything went, and he had to store that for free as well. So not only did none of us get paid, he also got the worst end of the deal because he never got anything picked up and nothing. I mean, it was just, and you can't sell burnt metal for anything. It's the lowest scrap on the market right now. So I mean, it's just a bad deal. There's no system in place in Colorado that covers that service for the state. I mean, you go out there, you clean up that mess for the state of Colorado to open up that highway, and the tower takes that whole burden. And so that's a lot of the stuff that most people don't see in towing when you're talking non-consent, because most people think right away non-consent is a car in a parking lot in private property. And so that's where it gets really twisted, is when people think about towing, they think about getting your car towed out of a parking lot. They don't think about the real reason that the towers are there. To elaborate, I talked to some representatives about the private property issue that they got going on right now with the bill and pricing, and they're worried about the towers and the property owners and who's going to pay the bill. And the funny thing is about 25-30 years ago, we used to tow private property tows before there was regulations, before there was all the regulations and the non-consent with the law enforcement. Before any of that happened, I remember charging property owners, like apartment complexes, $150 30 years ago. I would charge the property owner $150. I would come out, take the car away, store it, insure it, process it, and dispose of it. And if the owner picked the car up and paid the tow fee, then I would reimburse the property owner their $150. And so there was a system that worked that was beyond the regulations that we have today. And I think that the regulations today kind of muddy the water up really bad. And some of the rules that have gotten put in place are by a lot of the bad things that have happened. And so when you start looking at pricing, you have to really know where it all came from so that you can understand how that pricing structure became and what the costs and stuff were, Nicole.
Can I ask a quick question, John? Is there,
Absolutely.
like, as you're talking about the apartment buildings, et cetera, are they in any way financially, I hate to say reimbursed, but is there a financial benefit for having, outside of obviously having cars removed, but from having, do they get some kind of kickback? Is there a reason why they are hiring some of these more predatory towing companies that come in? And
I have never had anybody offer me a kickback. I've been accused of kickbacks, but I've never seen that. Most of it stems from city ordinances and fire departments, where a fire department, and I see this in mobile homes that just drives me crazy. A fire department will come in and say, if we see a vehicle in your fire lane, you're getting a $1,500 fine. And right away, the property owner's like, whoa, we don't want that to happen, right? So we need to hire a tow company to make sure that that doesn't happen so we don't get fined. Now, here's the problem. What I see is the tow company doesn't have any fucking morals. And excuse my language, but that's the reality of it. They have no morals. You can't, to me, when you're driving into the apartment complex, the mobile home park, whatever it may be, and you see a car that's maybe in the fire lane or maybe on the road a little bit, what's the situation? Is the building on fire? Is it required to be moved right this second? There are a lot of things where, you know, they should let a lot of things slide. You know, we had one lady that was literally taking the groceries out of her trunk and carrying them up to the 4th floor, and the tower hooked her car with the trunk still open and the groceries still in it, and hooked it and left with it with the trunk open. That's a moral problem right there. That is a serious tower, bad tower. That doesn't.
So do you have any recommendations for some of these excessive towers? Because those are the ones that, you know, I've had interactions with, or, well, I've had people that come to me with complaints that they've had interactions with, is like, you know, these companies that are like driving around looking for a reason to tow cars. And,
Right.
you know, I think that would be like my focus as working with the public would be like, how can those things be made better? I mean, yeah, there's lots of people with poor morals, but is there anything? I know it's not pricing, and I apologize, but I'm curious if you have any recommendations in that arena.
I think that the current bill they got running has some good talking points there, where slow the roll down a little bit. Slow it down to say, okay, you can't just tow it because by the letter of the law they're parked illegal. You have to be careful because you have to make sure that you don't create a problem for the law-abiding citizen. So going through and tagging someone and giving them a warning is a great way to slow the roll, right? But now here's the flip side of that coin. Now let's say you pay for a parking spot and you have your permit and you come home from work and there's someone parked in your parking spot. What do? You can't just, give them a sticker warning, because you're still sitting there going, I just want to park my car so I can go upstairs and die from my miserable day, right? So how do you fix that to say, okay, this person paid for a parking spot? How do you tow them right now so that you can use your parking spot so you can get on with your life? Right? So you have to, but how do you stop someone who's, unloading the groceries in the fire lane for 5 minutes and give them enough time to just get that done and then go park their car, right? How do you regulate that? How do you put that into place? I mean, giving a warning is great, but what happens in the situation where you're waiting for your parking spot? Now you have to park somewhere and then everybody can just park everywhere and everybody's just going to get warnings. So you see that's the bad part about it. It's really miserable. I think that it would be nice to have someone on site that can say, yes, tow it right now. No, don't tow it right now. But that creates another problem. And Nate, real quick, let me tell you why that creates a real problem. About 12 years ago, up in Boulder, we had a lady that was the manager of a fourplex. She had a problem tenant that kept parking a truck, and he kept doing it. Finally, she warned him. One day she said the hell with it, and she had it towed. The guy comes home from work, sees that his truck was towed. He goes to the impound lot. He gets it out. He pays the fees. He goes back. He almost kills this lady, puts her in the hospital intensive care for almost 2 weeks. So now you have the dilemma of, do we want to put people in harm's way? That's when they started coming up with, you know what, let's have the tower kind of monitor parking lots, give them rules to follow. And that's kind of where that stemmed from. But in turn, it's turned it into the mess that we have now. And there's not really a good way to fix that. Nate, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back real quick on the comment you made about, towing the person with the trunk open. It's something we do hear about a lot and have heard about a lot for years. Tow carriers, swooping in and hooking a vehicle and being gone before, minutes at 2-3 minutes. I've heard is as long as it sometimes takes. First off, I don't know how you can safely ensure a proper securement of a vehicle in that little of a time frame. But another thing to think about is we do have rules of the PUC that have been on the books for some time, as long as I can remember, in regards to filling out the tow invoice. And what it requires is that the tow invoice be properly filled out before the vehicle is removed from the private property. And so that's the first thing that always pops into my head when I hear a story like this that somebody relays to our office, is, well, if you towed the vehicle in 2 minutes, one, how did you make sure the vehicle was safely secured? And two, does that include the time it would have taken for you to fill out the tow invoice and before you removed it from the property? Probably not. It's difficult to prove those types of cases. Unfortunately, we don't have the staff to man a PUC investigator at every single private property in the state. That's just not, we don't quite have the staffing for that. So, we do hear a lot about towing issues, secondhand. People or, the vehicle owners or, whoever was operating the vehicle usually reaches out to us and explains what their position on what the situation was. The towing carrier then responds, and then our investigator just sorts out whatever available evidence they have to lean one way or another. And then obviously we take the next steps from there. Sometimes we have to dismiss the cases because there just isn't enough evidence either way. Sometimes, we do a violation warning. Sometimes we do a CPAN. Sometimes we can get a refund for the vehicle owner. Sometimes we can't. There are a lot of mechanisms we can use, and we really do rely very heavily on the evidence that's available. And that's another thing that I like about our PUC rules is there is a lot that a towing carrier is required to do to capture what they're doing. These tow invoices, have over 10 different requirements of different things they have to put in there. I think it's like 13 different things they have to have on every single tow invoice. And again, that information is used to identify what the situation was, what the circumstances were, things of that nature, the time, the place, where the vehicle was towed to or from, all these things have to be in there. Signatures, authorizations, itemized charges, everything's on there. It really is a pretty nice summation of the action. And again, we have a lot of rules that govern it. And so, we do really rely very heavily, especially in the towing industry, on the paperwork. That's the first thing we always ask for. Whenever there's a complaint filed against a towing carrier, the first thing we do is reach out to the towing carrier and say, send us your paperwork. And we go through it very thoroughly, admittedly, very thoroughly, just to make sure that the towing carrier is doing everything they're supposed to. They are held to a pretty high standard in regards to what we expect because the rules are so specific in regards to the paperwork they need to keep. And again, that's part of how we try to keep the towing carriers responsible and making sure that they're meeting all their requirements, mostly is through this paperwork. That's how we prove or dismiss a lot of the allegations that come in against towing carriers. So
I can contest that yes, it sucks really bad.
I'm sure it does. I didn't say you liked it. I said we liked it.
Yeah, some of it's really bad.
Can I ask a couple of questions based off of what you just said, Nate? First and foremost, and this would be one for John to potentially jump in on too. How long do those tow invoices take to complete, or kind of an idea on the timeline on those? And then my secondary question was, you said some of these we dismiss because there's not enough information one way or the other. So if you dismiss it, do you guys default to side with the towing carriers, or do you default to side with the person with the complaint?
Well, John, do you want to take her first part of the question and then I can jump in?
Well, it's kind of a two-way thing. if we're wrong on the complaint, it automatically goes to the vehicle owner. If we screwed up, we refund, period. No questions asked. If there's any kind of fault on our own, we refund. If we do this a lot, the PUC then fines us for that. Now, typically, depends on the tower. I got 20-year vets that can probably, in an ideal situation, in a parking lot, everything's hunky-dory, to get out, take the pictures, hook it up, secure it, an actual securement, a DOT correct securement, and fill out the paperwork. The best they are, 5-6 minutes, and that's a career vet in a perfect situation. You're talking more along the lines of 10 to 20 minutes on guys that are 5 years or less in the towing. Now, they do have repossession of vehicles. Well, you'll see a lot of the tow companies out there. They use what's called a sneaker. It's operated from the cab of the truck. I can literally run up, hook a car, and have it out of the spot in 30 seconds. Okay. Is that secure to go down the road? No. That's to literally come in. It has mechanical L-arms that come in, swoop, grab the tires, and away you go. Front-wheel drive car, you can, if it's a front-wheel drive car and you're hooking it from the front, it's literally under 30 seconds. I can back up, hook that car up, and be out of there. But not to regulation. You can't fill out the paperwork and strap it and everything else, and take pictures and all that stuff. So, does that answer your question?
Yes. And Nate, can you answer the other half though? I mean, I appreciate the fact that as a company owner with ethics, you're going to default to refunding, but I'm kind of curious what the industry standard is. I know here in Pueblo, we have less ethical towing carriers, and I know that it causes a lot of people a lot of issues.
So I think I know what the question you were asking. I believe the question was, when there's no clear determination on a particular violation that may or may not have been committed by the towing carrier, what is the default position? And one thing at the PUC, we are held to the standard where essentially we are responsible for essentially proving that a towing carrier committed a violation, and we fall back on all available evidence to do that. You know, I've worked a lot of, probably hundreds of tow cases during my career when I was in investigations. And you know, there's a lot of things that you're looking at. You know, you're not just looking at what the complainant, usually the vehicle owner, what they're alleging. You're looking at the whole thing. It now becomes a fully audited tow. So say you have somebody who files a complaint and they say, you know, oh, you know, I went to this tow carrier storage facility and they demanded a cash payment. That's always been something that's been really hard to prove, because sometimes it just ends up being a, you know, they said kind of thing. And that's hard, and we've had trouble with that. I mean, we have cited for that before when the evidence supports it. It's hard to get evidence that supports it, that is occurring. But anyway, so that might be something that you look at and it's like, there's just not enough here to prove that actually occurred. You know, it very well may have, but we just can't support it by any substantial evidence. However, the tow is now under our review. And so we're not just going to look at that particular allegation. We're going to look at the tow invoice. We're going to look at the authorization. We're going to look at the contract if there is one. We're going to look at all the fees and charges to make sure that was done appropriately. We're going to look at statutory notice. I mean, we're going to look at every single thing we can look at in regards to that tow. Sometimes we find something, sometimes we don't. But again, anytime we come to the tow carrier with a violation, which is usually the first step towards potentially recovering some kind of a refund for the vehicle owner, that is based on very stable evidence when we do that. And that's why, as John said earlier, you know, if we're at fault, we refund, no questions asked. That is usually the response we get from towing carriers, because what we identify as being an issue that has occurred, some kind of violation of PUC rule, of statute, whatever the case may be, that is based on pretty solid evidence. And that's when we take that forward and take those next steps. But again, there are instances, and I've had many of them myself, where I've looked at a tow every which way I can, and you know what? There just is nothing there. I can say this was a problem. This was a violation. There just was not enough evidence there. In those cases, we have to dismiss the case with no action. We don't have any other option beyond that.
And technicalities.
Understood. Yeah, I'm just trying to understand the process a little bit better. And sorry, Joyanne, your hand's been up for a while.
It's all right. So I have a couple of questions now, so it's my turn to hog everyone's time. I have so the first question is like someone, I think John, you mentioned kickbacks, and Nicole, you mentioned kickbacks. Is it common in the towing industry that do I say operators if it's the person operating the vehicle, or is the operator the company? What's the correct term?
The operator would be the employee that's running the tow truck.
Okay, so is it common in the industry that operators get like bonuses for how many cars they towed or anything like that? And then my second question, I have seen in like reviews and complaints where people talk about their cars getting damaged, or the underside of their cars getting damaged. And I was wondering, John, with your expertise, if you could give a couple examples of how that could happen, where it would be the towing company's fault,
Sure. It
And
happens.
yes. And then I was also wondering if this is related, slightly off topic, if maybe Nate can address like the boot, like the dreaded boot, because does the PUC also regulate that as well? Are there actual like boot companies, or is it that like municipalities have their own thing? I've been curious to know how that works, because my understanding is that it's generally separate from the tow company, although I could be.
So just quickly on booting before, John, you take the other question. So booting, yeah, for a long time it wasn't statewide regulated. It was regulated by municipalities. So I know the Denver Department of Excise and Licensing, way back when, they were the Denver authority that licensed booting companies. I think there was only like 3 in the whole city and county that actually had licenses to do it. They did see fit to include it in statute. I believe it's part 8 of 4010.1 that essentially makes PUC the authority to regulate booting companies. It's not exactly transportation, but anyway, they saw fit to make us the agency that regulates that. And so it was difficult at first. We don't admittedly get a lot of complaints on it. Or at least I haven't seen a lot of them. We don't have that many booting companies that are licensed with us. I'd probably put it somewhere around a dozen, whole state. And yeah, that's, we could always do more in that industry, but it is still pretty new. We're still kind of feeling it out. But yeah, no, we do regulate booting companies and have for, oh geez, I want to say it's around 2 years now, something like that.
Yeah, right about that.
And so but how does the booting, like, I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, how do they, what all can they enforce? I think like the most common one is like unpaid parking tickets or something. But I mean, what is it? And I don't understand how that works. Then what do they do? Do they have contracts with towing companies, and then the towing operator comes and takes the car?
If there's a couple booting companies that are both a booting company and a tow company, and then there's some booting companies that just call other tow companies. So they boot something because it's parked illegally, and then they never ever pick it up, and then a month later they're like, all right, we got to get rid of this thing, and they call a tow company to haul it away. That's one general. Some of them leave it booted for 48 hours and then automatically tow it. They boot for different reasons, no permits or things like that. That not too many of them get into the parking tickets anymore, because that was all Denver. So we fought as the towers to stay away from booting. We don't want towing mixed up with booting, because towing has enough problems. We don't need more. So thank God they did that.
So if someone is booted improperly, then who is on the hook? The towing company or the boot company? Or is there even a process for complaints?
The boot company would be the because they're now regulated through PUC. So if you had a problem with a boot, you would call PUC in and complain about the boot company. If the towing company towed it after it was booted, then I guess you could have a complaint from the boot company that booted it to begin with and the towing company that towed it, depending on what the circumstances were of why it was towed. There would have to be some kind of authorization for the tower to tow it.
Got it.
So if a booting company says, "Hey, come tow this car," that booting company also has to have a contract with because me as the tower, I have to prove my authorization. So I can't just say, "Yeah, Fred just told me to tow it." I have to have documentation because Nate's going to come at me and say, "Who gave you authorization to tow that?" And if I go, some guy Fred from the boot company, I'm in trouble. So I have to have documentation that says, all right, Fred has authorization from the owner to call the tow company. I have to be in that contract. All that has to jive to say my authorization ultimately came from the property owner through the booting company. And I would have to prove that all the way through. Otherwise, Nate would nail me with it. Boom. Technicality. Refund the money.
Got it. And the other two questions I asked about were like I don't know, bonuses, like
Yeah,
for the operators. Like, is that
pay rates. So pay rates in towing is weird. Some pay is hourly, and they pay commission after hours. Some pay straight commission. I pay a base salary with a commission tally, so they have a bonus if they kind of worked a lot during the pay period. Generally in private property, those operators are paid per tow. So they get like $50 for every tow they do. So the more tows they do in the day, the more money they're going to make, which is a driving force for towing the lady with the groceries in the trunk open, right? That's an extra $50 in her pocket, right? No morals. Now, damages can happen if towed improperly. Depending on what kind of towing equipment you're using, whether you're using a wrecker style or if you're using a flatbed style. So a flatbed, people think a flatbed is damage free. Well, that's if they hook to the proper things. You can hook to tie rods or stabilizing arms or something that's not designed, and you can bend that stuff. You can pop oil pans and oil filters, and you can do all kinds of things damage wise. Even vets, that do it for many years can damage something if they're not paying close attention. Bend mufflers, scrape bumpers, things like that. The basic of a dragging of a vehicle, let's say it's in park, and you see that a lot. You'll see a lot of pictures and videos. Sometimes you'll see a tower loading something onto a flatbed and the wheels are dragging. That doesn't hurt the vehicle at all. It doesn't hurt the transmission. If you're driving down the road and it's doing that, yeah, you're going to burn the rubber off the tires. It's not good for it, right? But a small, slide of a vehicle 20 feet up the bed and 20 feet off the bed does not hurt the transmissions or the tires or anything like that. It's it's where their hook points are. If you try to pull a vehicle that's in park, and you're hooked to the stabilizing arms, those things are generally aluminum and they're going to bend. And then now you have problems with your alignment, and your tires are going to wear weird. And for someone like me, I can look at a car and tell you if it was tow damage just by simply looking at it. There's a lot of people will look at their spoilers and go, "Oh, you damaged my spoiler." The problem is, how many times do people look at the front end of their cars after it's towed? Not many people look at the front end of their car until they have it towed. You'd be surprised how many scrapes are on that little plastic spoiler on the bottom of your car. You just don't notice, especially in Colorado when you get snow over 6 inches. I mean, sometimes them get ripped off in the snow and people don't even notice it. But damages are very, very direct. You can pretty much tell by what equipment towed it if what damage has happened. And by right, all towers, it's in their custody. They should take care of that damage. It happens. I'm not going to say my guys are perfect. It happens. It's like I get operators that come in all the time. You should hire me because I'm the best and I've never damaged nothing. They're lying. Every operator damages a car at some time in their career. It's going to happen. It's just human nature. It's just things happen, unfortunately. The difference is do you own up to it and take care of it or don't? So, but
And
there is nobody that you can really turn that into as a consumer, right? You have to fight that company in small claims courts. So different than any other situation out there in the world. If someone does something to your property, you got to fight them for it if they don't own up to it.
got it. And like, so, I mean, put aside like, you know, the motorhome or the bus or something like that. But for most standard vehicles, like, is the equipment like very universal? Like, do you ever need to, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
I don't know. You need slightly different equipment or some different attachment. For example, if you have a, you know, an SUV versus a sedan or
No.
something, or is it
No.
pretty universal?
So like right now I have probably, I don't know, 40 some units, 20 some of those are all flatbeds, because in today's world, all-wheel drives, things like that, everything's plastic. It's just easier to tow on a flatbed because it's easier on the operators and it's easier on what you're towing, because you don't have to worry about all the drives and things like that where you do in a wrecker. In a wrecker, you got to put dollies down. It's much more labor intense. It takes longer. It's miserable. So in general, your basic $120,000 flatbed can pretty much tow your everyday run-of-the-mill passenger vehicle, from Volkswagens to pickup trucks, SUVs, all-wheel drives, two-wheel drives, rear-wheel drive, doesn't really matter. The only time you really got to get into special stuff is when you're talking a 16-year-old that took his Honda Civic and made it 1 inch off the ground, a Lamborghini, things like that are just really, really low to the ground. You got to have special ramps and special equipment and stuff like that to get those up safely without damaging the bodies. Other than that, your basic manufactured cars, no, it's all pretty much the same equipment.
And I'm sorry because I did read the PUC rules, but I probably might have missed it. Are there regulations on the vehicles that you guys can use, or equipment? Or...
Yes, they have to have a certain size tire, dual wheels on certain trucks. You have to have weight ratings and stuff on your equipment, things like that. We're also not only, we have PUC regulations we follow, we also have DOT regulations that we follow, and then like in law enforcement, we also have law enforcement regulations that we have to follow. So there's a lot of regulations that towers got to follow and stay within the boundaries of all that. And then, of course, you have the working load limits when you start getting into recoveries and stuff like that go into the OSHA side of the world, which PUC doesn't. Thank God PUC doesn't get into that world, because that would really make a mess of things. But anytime you're doing big recoveries, things like that, water recoveries, that all gets really in depth.
So in regards to the equipment and accessories, if you want to take a look at Rule 6506, that is the PUC rule that has a lot of that kind of stuff in there. I think there's some stuff peppered in other rules, but that's like the main focal point you want to look at in regards to, again, equipment and accessories for tow vehicles. And like John said, yeah, a lot of tow trucks are also governed by 49 CFR. That's the Code of Federal Regulations. That's by the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carriers Safety Administration. Colorado State Patrol dabbles in that a bit as well. Those are the kind of things that they have to adhere to. And then I know you mentioned the law enforcement contracts sometimes might require some additional things on top of that.
The PUC equipment is very basic. I mean, it is the bottom of the line basic equipment required. I mean, it's basic. And the funny thing is about 50% of the towers out there don't have that basic equipment. I did offer PUC a chance to give me one of their officers that I would house them in an office, pay for their meals, and guarantee that they would get their pay threefold in fines if they just come to my facility and watch some of the towers that come in and out of my facility. It's amazing how many illegals are out there.
So, and I don't want to, if I'm going too far off track, because I'm asking about damage, it's just something that I've seen in,
Sure.
like when people complain. So is there anything so are you saying that the rules like regulate the vehicle, but is there anything in the rules that stop you from using the wrong kind of vehicle or something substandard or equipment or anything like that, right? Like
No.
Okay. And you can tell I clearly am not in the towing industry, and I've never hooked up a car. So really, if damage does happen, I mean, it is more often than not. I mean, accidents happen, but it's more often than not. You're saying the operator maybe going too fast, or
right, just going too fast, gets in a hurry, doesn't see something. Gets sidetracked by somebody screaming at him or something and forgets to hook the proper spot, or a lot of that stuff is not designed for towing. I mean, most cars are not designed to be towed, but they do have parts where you hook up. And if you're not careful, if your equipment is not adequate and you're not familiarized with something, it doesn't take much to pop an oil pan or to bend a tie rod or something like that if you hooked in correctly. It can happen that quick. I mean, I get a lot of times where they're pulling the vehicle up to bed, and one of the extra hooks that they're not currently using hooks onto the bed and then breaks the winch line, and then the car's free rolling down a driveway into something, normally a mailbox or a tree or something. I mean, something as simple as that could go wrong with towing. I mean, doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen.
that would definitely torque someone off.
Yes.
Normally
Me.
I don't know if Nicole or anyone else had something, because
I'm kind of curious, in line with your damage thing, Nate, does the PUC have an outlet for complaints for damages, or was John correct and that really is more of a civil matter and you have to take them to small claims court?
Yeah, no, he's mostly correct.
Insurance and then let them recoup, but
Yeah, no, he's mostly correct, and that's something that's longstanding. The PUC has traditionally never got involved when it comes to the damages to a vehicle. We will typically, and a lot of people call in about that very thing, and our response to that is usually we can provide you with the insurance information regarding the towing carrier. We actually have a rule that requires towing carriers to release it to people when they ask as well. Or a small claims court is always an option for a range of issues, not specific to towing.
Yeah,
Thank
I mean,
you.
that's
And
it.
then,
You can get your, like, let's just say that I damaged your car, right? And I don't want to talk to you. I'm just an asshole and say, you know what, piss off. You can still call the PUC and say, hey, he never offered to help me, give me his insurance information. That boom, that's a bad mark on me that Nate can then investigate. But Nate will also say, here's their insurance information, and you can make a claim with their insurance company right off the bat. And then that gets into a lot of the details. And when, like my insurance company, when I turn a claim into them, they take my side and then they take the owner's side, and then they send out an individual appraiser to look at it and verify the claim to find out if they're going to agree to pay it or not. And that kind of eliminates the tower from saying, no, they're lying. I didn't do that, because the individual claims adjuster will see that obviously the tie rod's pulled back. I mean, it's pretty definite. When you see tow damage, it's not something that just happens especially like tie rods. When you hit a curb, you slide and you hit a curb, the tie rod bends down because the way the wheel kicks in from the curb. When you're pulling on it by a tow truck, it bends the other way. So it's pretty blatant to see that straight piece is now bent towards the tow truck. It was pulled that way. It doesn't take a lot to see what tow damage really is. I mean, if there's a scrape on the side of it, there's telltales of what kind of truck towed it, because normally, like in private property, hook trucks, right? It's more of the old style wrecker where it lifts one end of the vehicle, and then the rear wheels of the vehicle tow along, right? So if your scrape is at an angle on the side of the car, obviously it was lifted up on the tow truck when it hits something. And then when you set the car down, it's got an angle. It's pretty easy to put two and two together to say, oh, that's tow damage.
I had a question about receipts. So do you have to give an itemized receipt when the individual picks up their car? I thought so. Okay. And
Yes.
Yes.
then is like, I know we have rules around signage and everything. Do we have any rules that like where the towing company tells you if you have a complaint, call Nate? I mean, or do people come to Nate because they Googled it and found they could make a complaint?
I am specifically not on Google by design. But no, there is a requirement. It's under Rule 6509 for tow invoice content, where on every single tow invoice that a tow carrier has, they have to have a little message. They usually put it at the bottom that says "Report problems to the Public Utilities Commission," and it has our Consumer Affairs hotline on there. So that is, every tow invoice has that message.
Okay.
Yeah, and I put it right where the owner signs. And right below that, it has that information, and that's on every invoice. And I'm different than most companies. I have multiple invoices because I'll have the tow invoice that was from the operator, and then I have the invoice from the impound, which is a statement that kind of references all of the information, because that way when I have a complaint or something, I can pull up my operator, I can pull up my dispatch records, I can pull up my impound records, I can pull in my lot tech records, and I can pull in my release records. So I'll have 5 different forms on one vehicle that comes through here. And that also helps keep honesty, right? Now, I wanted to say that you try to trust your employees, but you don't trust your employees, right? So the more employees you have involved, the more chances you can find if someone's trying to pull a fast one. And I've had that before, where a driver damages something and then tries to hide it, but then it's picked up by one of the lot techs in or out or something like that, and find it, and they lose their job.
I have a question about the drop fee. Can a person pay that with a credit card?
Yes.
Or okay, I wanted to make sure, because I know when they pick up their vehicle, you're required to take cards, but I wasn't sure. Okay. And then I have a question about ID and verifying owners of cars. So
IDS.
Yeah, well, like, so someone's going to come retrieve their vehicle.
Okay.
What if the owner of the vehicle has passed away, or what if it's a spouse or something like that? Or can I authorize someone to come get my vehicle for me? Like, my car got towed, I'm out of town. You know what I mean? I want someone to get my car. Are any of those things allowable? How does that work?
Yes.
Can you talk about
all
that?
of that's allowable, a lot easier on the private property side, because they can simply attest on a form that says I'm authorized to pick it up, and I have the keys and it was towed from Burger King. On law enforcement side, it's more difficult because they require exactly the owner of the vehicle, current license plate, sometimes even insurance, Sometimes it's recovered steals, but there's a lot of times where like you're in the hospital and you can't come to the impound to get your stuff out because you're in the hospital. You can simply give authorization to your spouse or your friend or your neighbor or whatever, as long as you have the right documentation saying that you're given authorization. Same thing. You could say, you know what, I authorize my insurance agent to come look at the car and evaluate it. Because in a law enforcement, I can't let no one in. So I can't let your insurance in. I can't let anybody in unless you specifically say it's okay, and I have to have that in writing. So, but yeah, it's okay to do that.
And for on the private side, are they like required to allow you to have an authorized person, or is it just permissible?
Well, I would say it's more permissible because in the private property rules, Nate, you can, which one is that in the release rules? There's you have to produce a driver's license and two things off the list to be able to get access to a vehicle.
Yeah, it's what we call the authorized operator provision. It's Rule 6512F. And what that does is it basically, just as he described, it's and I think one of the reasons we put this rule in, back when it first went in, was for scenarios like, say you got a school kid going to school up at CSU, and he drove his owned parents' vehicle out here from California, and he's driving it around. Totally okay with the parents, no problem. But if he gets towed, then again, there needs to be an option for him to be able to secure that vehicle and not have the parents have to fly out from California just to sign some paperwork. And so this allows it to be demonstrated in rule that this is an acceptable release scenario. And so, like he said, the person that shows up and claims to be the authorized operator of the vehicle, they present their driver's license, which the towing carrier usually makes a copy of, just so they have it for their records. And then they sign what essentially is an affidavit, essentially saying, I am the authorized operator of this vehicle. And they are also required to release or also provide 2 of 5 items, which are the keys to the motor vehicle, proof of insurance, vehicle registration, the VIN, and or knowledge of the location of the vehicle when it was towed. So again, like John described, if somebody shows up and they have keys to the vehicle and they know it was towed from the Burger King, those 2 things and the signed attestation is enough for the tow carrier to feel comfortable releasing it to them. And it's actually required by rule. If somebody shows up with the driver's license, signs the attestation, provides 2 of the 5 things, the tow carrier is obligated to release the vehicle.
Okay, thanks. And that's what I wanted to make sure, that it's not just that the tow carrier could, but they have to for that.
In that scenario, yes. As long as they meet all the standards of 6512S, yes, the tow carrier has to release it.
Okay, all right.
The only thing that we have as a tow carrier is judgment. If we feel they're drunk or they pose a threat to public safety, then that's the only way we're allowed to say, no, we're not releasing the car to you because you're a danger to some. But it's got to have pretty good reasonings for that. Normally you have to have law enforcement backing you up on that.
Yeah, that's under 6512E. If you want to look, there's five exceptions to release procedures based on that. So like John said, yeah, if there's reasonable belief that the person picking up the vehicle is like under the influence of drugs or alcohol, things of that nature. There's a list of 5 things under that exemption criteria. Greg, did you have anything to say? You've been listening this whole time.
I got nothing. I'm just listening.
All right.
Can I ask a few more questions, guys? I'm sorry.
Sure, absolutely.
So mine are a little bit different. I'm kind of curious. Can, in line with what Joy Ann was saying as far as picking up of the vehicle, what about calling in a tow? I mean, on those apartment complexes where you've got the signage showing ABC Tow Company, can I just be mad at my ex-boyfriend and call and have his car towed because, ABC Towing regulates this, or do they verify that I work for whatever apartment complex. I'm curious. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So on our contracts that we have with private property, there are signers, as you will. So we have up to 4 or 5 on our contracts that are allowed to call in. Normally, it's whoever the property owner sets as their authorized person. Normally, it's an on-site manager or something like that, and they have to call in and say this is so and so with this property, and they have to be on the list. Now, if you were to call and know that person, you might be able to get around that a little bit if the tower isn't watching that real close. A lot of times they use a code, because we don't put the authorization. If Jill calls in the tow, we don't put Jill authorized that on the invoice. What we say is authorized number 2, or some of them have code names that they use because you don't want repercussions coming back to the person that's living there. So we'll put authorized person number 2, and then in a situation where Nate has to come in and say, "Hey, who authorized this?" I can say, "Here's my invoice, my tow invoice with authorization number 2, and here's my contract that says number 2 is Jill," and et cetera, et cetera. That's all got to match and flow through that contract. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's a violation.
I was just kind of curious if that ever
Yeah.
gets. So then I have one more specific question on payment, especially from the public side. I am curious. You had mentioned like assistance for people with stolen cars. I'm curious if there's any kind of assistance for like low income individuals, if there's any exclusions. I know I'm out of my league here, but if there's any exclusions for maybe people that have mental health issues, or these are they're I mean, I'm thinking of like homeless. Sometimes people are living in their cars, but what about disabled people in this, their specialized van is the only unit that they can use for transportation. Are there any exclusions, and are there any financial resources for folks that are not able to pay? Because of
That's
course those amounts just grow.
right by the day. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
the quick answer is no, there isn't. There are certain cities have victims assistance programs, but they would have to contact the victims assistance. Those people then would have to justify it being okay, and then they would have to call their tower and make a deal with the tower. And a lot of times the problem is there's nothing that says a tower has to follow that or has to accept that. I've had many times where the assistants will say, "Hey, can you cut this down?" or can you charge us a discounted rate or bill us for it? We're going to take care of it. It's really my choice to say yes or no. I mean, I could just say no because nothing regulates me to say I have to do that.
Understood. Okay.
But I
Thank you.
wish that we could get it passed through legislation, a victims assistance program. It really needs to happen. It really, really does. And not only just for people, but it would also help the towers too.
Thanks, guys. Those are all of my questions. I'm done. I'm done hogging you.
Man, you guys are easy. Easy.
There's been a few complex questions. I've enjoyed those.
I have actually I don't know how long we were scheduled to go. So if we were only to go to 3, then I will hold my question. But I don't know if it's so much as a question, but I think a general topic, and that would be disability placards and parking. So I don't know if we do this again, if folks would be willing to bring their expertise or questions to talk about that. And then I would just like to generally have a conversation about private enforcement and business, because I think sometimes the complaints are a little bit different. But So I just kind of wanted to put that out into the universe.
Well,
Although,
shoot, I'm good. Go ahead, shoot.
so on the disability side, do your operators, and wait, can you please first, can you remind me, do you do just police tow or do you also do private?
I do all. I do
Okay.
everything.
I wanted to make sure before. Okay. So do you train your like operators on like disability, like laws around disability parking and placards? Because what I hear is that, you know, on the one hand, like the community is very angry when disability parking isn't enforced because someone is taking a space that they shouldn't be taking and impedes another person's, you know, ability to park and be mobile and get around. And then the other hand, I've also heard complaints of towing operators, they're not knowing or not caring what the law is. And then we have people who are legally parked with the placard and they are getting towed. So for example, if you have a placard, like you are allowed to park in more spaces or in more places, I should say, than a person without, you know, unless you are, there are some, you know, limitations, but I have heard stories of people who, you know, have been towed illegally. And as you can imagine, I think Nicole touched on, that can make a huge detrimental impact on someone's life, particularly if they have a wheelchair accessible vehicle. It's not like they can just call an Uber and get home, you know?
Right.
So I was just, I mean, I don't know if I had like a specific question, but I was putting it out there.
Well,
And there's anything
the basics on most operators is looking for your general evidence of, if you're the one monitoring the parking lot, you have to use your own brain of why you're towing something. It's simple when you have a manager of a property that says, hey, tow that car. At that point, the tower just says, yes, sir, ma'am, and they sign your invoice and you tow that car. So when you're the one monitoring, you have to make sure, is there a placard in view? To have the right plate? Things like that. You have to make, and what I teach my guys is pretend that you're in front of the judge presenting your case. If you can't do that on paper, you don't touch it. And that's kind of how we train here. So it does it slip through the cracks with some? It may. I haven't really ever heard someone towing one for not being placarded or something, or having placards and then being towed. I've never heard of that.
So we hear about it sometimes, not a lot, but we have had some people call in and ask about, you know, being towed from handicapped spaces. Like I said, I don't think it happens a lot, but it does happen sometimes, and we do usually hear about it when it does. I actually did a pretty deep dive on this last year when one of these types of questions came up. And basically, the determination we made is that under those circumstances, we can always investigate a tow occurring from private property. All of those are under our purview. But in regards to applying some additional criteria besides what we usually would require or reference when we're looking into one of these tows, we actually can't do it through that lens of the fact that somebody was towed out of a handicapped spot specifically. What that actually falls to is the Department of Revenue. There's actually a statute, and I'm seeing some references. I pulled up an old email where I talked about this, and I'm seeing some references, but I don't know that they're totally accurate, so I don't want to shout them out here. But it basically, what I recall from when I did this research was that if there was an issue in regards to somebody not being able to park in a handicapped space when they are validly placarded, when they have an appropriate license plate or placard, that is something that apparently the enforcement mechanism rests with Department of Revenue or local police. That's what my research showed. I don't know what mechanism DOR has that would do that, but that is what the statute says. And so that's what we ended up relaying to this particular individual when this all came up. So that's something to consider. Based on my review of, and this is all under Title 42, which is a big Department of Revenue, book. Most of those statutes are Department of Revenue. So what I could understand from my, legal review, if you want to call it that, it was that if somebody is placarded, has a valid placard or license plate that indicates, the handicap nature, they can park in those spaces. That was pretty clear, in my opinion, through the statute. But again, we just couldn't pursue it beyond what we would for any other tow that we investigate, because again, per Title 42, it said that the enforcement mechanism for that particular statute rested with DOR, or I think local law enforcement is what it said. So I don't know what ended up happening beyond that. We passed that information along. I'm not sure where it went from there. Again, I haven't talked to anybody over at DOR about it, so I don't know if they have some kind of special investigations unit or something that deals with this kind of thing. But that was what we found out when we did that deep dive into the statutes.
Yeah, thanks for that. I don't think, if they do, I don't know about it. And until, I think I'm looking at the same statute you are. And in my mind somewhere, I was just thinking, of course, irrespective of where it is in statute, somewhere I was thinking of, buried in there somewhere is it's going to say the PUC enforces this, or it's cross-referenced elsewhere. It's not, apparently. But like a person with a disabled placard can park in any space, including private property, as long as I think as long as it's a designated space for a vehicle. I think you could even also park in loading in some cases. And the exceptions are if absolutely nobody can park there. But there are some narrow exemptions. But I've just heard stories of individuals who do utilize that right and the authority that they have under statute, but then they're towed, even though they have the disabled placard and they are able to park, because you also have you have a little bit of extra liberty if you have a placard in parking, because accessible parking is so hard to find. And again, it's not like you can easily find a place elsewhere and travel safely, or whatever. You just have fewer options. So that's why I had made that inquiry. But it is good to know that if there is a potential violation, we might not have a remedy or a official process in place.
Yeah, so I actually just went ahead and looked up the statute I had in my email here, and it looks like it is the one I saw way back when. So it's 42-4-1208, and then it's subsection 6C. 6 is the enforcement of reserved parking, and C states a peace officer and the department, meaning the Department of Revenue, may investigate an allegation that a person is violating this section. So that was the determination we came to, all those months ago when this came up. And so that's where we referred them. I don't know what happened beyond that, but that is the statute, 42-4-1208 6C.
I think the only
mechanism for it.
I think the only thing that a tower could, I guess if a tower tows one that was placard, then the complaint could be made to PUC saying, hey, I had my placards on my car. They towed me out of the handicap. Why did they do that? And then PUC could then look at that and say, who authorized this tow? Why did you tow it? And if they say it was in a handicap spot and they didn't have placards, then it would become what happened to the placards. And then, of course, pictures help with that as well. So if they found that the tower did tow it illegally because it was placard, then Nate would have something there to say, you refund the money, etc., because it's a violation of the reasons why it was towed.
Yeah, and
the tower still has that to a degree.
Because
go
ahead.
And we would investigate the tow regardless. The question is, what standards can we apply to what we're looking into? And again, there's not a lot outside of either Title 40 or the PUC agency's own commission rules that we can apply to any of our investigations, that we're kind of reined in that way, where it's like, okay, we can apply all the rules that apply to a specific situation, again, that are in, it's 4 CCR 723-6 is the code. And then, so we'll apply any of those that apply to the situation. In some cases, we can apply statutes. Those can be directly applied in some circumstances as well. Not always, but a lot of the time. And if we have those options available, that's what we can look into. It's when the scope extends beyond that that we have a problem. So imagine, you know, like we were talking about earlier with consensual towing, we have pretty much only a handful of rules that deal with consensual towing. Most of our rules are specifically geared towards non-consensual towing. And it even says that in the rules. And so that's why a lot of times when people call in and want to make a complaint about consensual towing, more often than not, we have to say, there's no rules about that. Or, you know, that's not, what you're talking about isn't specifically regulated for consensual tows. It might be regulated for non-consensual tows, but that's not what the situation was. Same concept. We have to be very careful about what rules we apply. Otherwise, we're hanging out there on a ledge trying to enforce something we don't actually have jurisdiction to enforce.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. Because I think I had assumed that like the Department of Revenue would be the regulating body if a person were using their placard improperly or illegally, because that can always be rescinded, right? But I just assumed, like, if the towing operator has to justify why they towed a vehicle, then the PUC could enforce if, you know, the towing operator towed somebody with a disability placard improperly. You know what I mean? But if there is a potential gap or question, then hey, maybe that'll be legislation everybody can agree on.
Well, and again, if somebody calls in and says, I want to make a complaint about a tow, we're like, great, bring it on. You know, send it over. Go through Consumer Affairs. You know, if there's something there, it'll get referred to investigation and my team looks at it. Great. It's just when somebody comes to us and says, I want you to investigate this specific thing. Again, if it's something we can investigate based on our rules and our statutes that we have authority to investigate, great, we'll go for it. We'll hit it with everything we got. But again, there are people who come to us with things they want us to look into that we just can't. And we explain that to them and we refer them on to the appropriate agency if that's something that's there. So like in this case where we referred the gentleman over to Department of Revenue and we said, please reach out to them. Here's the statute if you want to reference that to them when you call over there. You know, I mean, we try to help when we can, even if we're not the regulating authority for a particular issue. We do our best to try to find out who that is, just so they don't have to keep just shooting in the dark. So, you know, we try our best to help people when we can, even if it's not us.
Got it. I think I'm okay with, I mean, I will always have more questions if you allow me to keep talking. This stuff is so much fun. But I think my major questions are answered, and thank you. I just want to say thanks to John for letting us throw all this stuff at you, and Pete as well. But I feel like I learned a lot. Nicole, do you have anything else, or?
I do not have anything else. I'm good with us ending the meeting at 3:30 if everyone else is okay with that. But yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for answering all of the questions. And I think we both have our specialized approaches, but it gives us more understanding of the industry as a whole and kind of how it works. Because like Joyanne was saying, I don't tow a lot of cars. I don't really know how it all works. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Again, I would renew my suggestion that everybody, again, just take a look at the 6500 series of rules. Again, if you want to look at I believe it's part 4 of 4010.1. Those are the towing statutes that we deal with most often. And then again, that primer from one of the earlier meetings, which is up on the website. I believe I saw it up there under, I think it was either the first or the second meeting, under the documents, the meeting minutes and agenda. I think it's in that link. Encourage you to just take a look at them. It gives you quite a bit of background. And then, you know, we'll continue to answer questions that you might have. I would also second, John for lending his expertise in our conversation. Greg, last chance for some input if you want to jump in.
I'm good, just listening and learning.
Well, and so we have a training coming in April something. I'm terrible with this. Or is it May? I think it's May. Sometime in May, we got training coming in for the operators in the state, and we do this every spring and fall. You guys are more than welcome to come in and learn some of that training if you want to see what goes into that, and you're always welcome to come in for ride-alongs if you want. You got to sign a waiver, in case something drives over the truck while you're in it. But I mean, you can always do ride-alongs, things like that, to get a better feel of what's going on, or even walk through an operation. I can give you a to Z walkthrough if you'd like to help wrap your mind around some things if you get confused or lost. I'm always open for that.
Sounds like a great offer. Thank you.
And I, as long as we're not, violating any rules in open meetings, I would definitely be interested. You mentioned there was a training. Are there snacks, John?
Yes, breakfast and lunch.
All right. I'd actually be interested. I want to learn as much as I can about the industry. It certainly helps in these conversations moving forward. And I really do thank you for walking us through all this stuff and being gracious and patient as you explain things that might be obvious to you, but not to everybody else.
Right. Well, the more educated you guys are, the better you are for my industry. And really, that's what my goal is, to keep the integrity of the towing industry to where it was started in the early 1900s. It was started to help people. When people broke down, you had someone that you could call day or night to come help you. And that's, towers were part of the rescue side of things. And here in the 21st century, that's really gone to shit. So my goal is to try to get it back to its roots.
Greg, did you have something?
I got something now.
All right, what do you got?
So, John, you mentioned earlier looking at working in like the victims' rights kind of stuff with when you have like a stolen vehicle and stuff and making them pay for the tow bills. What was the state's issue with getting that going so that victims aren't having to pay to get their stuff?
It was the fiscal. It creates a fiscal note. And that's the problem. And what I said was we should have a state thing that not only helped victims, but also helped the towers. If we could get a program that helped the towers in their losses, help victims in their hard times, we could lower the rates in the towing industry. Mm-hmm. The losses that towers take on the non-consent side is the reason why the rates are the way they are. And that's why it's so black and white between a consent tow and a non-consent tow, is the loss that you have. When you look at things like that truck wreck on I-70 in Denver West, those towers did all that work for the state for nothing, right? Victims, they get their cars stolen by some crook, and they're just not always is their car even recoverable. Most of the time they're totaled.
Yep.
They stole it, they ran from the cops, they ended up destroying their car. So not only is now their stolen car at the impound lot that now they're liable for the tow fees, but now their car's totaled as well. So that now they have a totaled car they have to pay for. It's a complete loss for that person. It's the same thing with low income. I mean, the state of Colorado has how many homeless people living in their cars? I probably tow a dozen of those a month, easily a dozen, that law enforcement tows because they don't have current plates, they don't have driver's licenses, and they're living in their car because they're broke. They don't have money for license plates or a driver's license. They're broke.
Right.
You know, there's got to be an avenue that we can help them as towers to say, here you go, here's your car. Good luck staying away from that city that impounded you. You know, but here again, the tower still has that cost of giving that service. And not trying to be a hard ass, but saying, guys, I got to cover my cost. I got to at least break even and pay my people and pay my fuel bill. And today the fuel bill is miserable, right? I mean, your best tow truck, I got brand new tow trucks. The best they get is 8 miles to the gallon. So when you have a truck gets 8 miles a gallon and it's $5 for a gallon of fuel, it's hard to do things for free. So the biggest problem we were having is they did not want to create a fiscal. And we went in with a very small thing about just help victims. That's it. This is strictly for victims where someone has an avenue to go when their car was stolen.
Yeah.
We didn't even elaborate on any of the other areas, and they wouldn't pass it because it was a fiscal. No one wants to pass the fiscal.
Yeah. So I wonder, I know with, especially you run into issues with these steals that they just dump them somewhere, you don't get suspect info. But if we are at least able to arrest somebody that was in one of these stolen cars and that victim was able to go back for restitution, is the tow industry able to get in on any of that at all?
Well, the problem is normally the crooks, yeah, they get the restitution, but then they don't have a job, so you can't. They don't pay, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've had times where we've had criminals, you know, break in our facility and damage stuff, and we've caught them or whatever, and restitution, and you get a judgment against them, and you get no money. I mean, I've got over $6 million out in claims and restitutions that has been on the books for the last dozen years. I'll never recoup.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hearing out of this is, you know, we have our budget stuff that we have to go over and the pay and everything for this term. This sounds like something that actually needs to, maybe we can address as a tow task force for maybe the next legislation terms. That maybe we could try to somehow reintroduce it or just do something with it to try to give it some more, I guess, teeth for them to look into. Maybe tied into Victim Rights Act or something, but I know a lot of that goes with like persons crimes, not a lot of property crime type stuff, because, you know, the state's lowering everything to misdemeanors. That's property crimes. You know, somebody can break into your house. As long as nobody's there, it's only a misdemeanor.
Right.
Stuff like that, it's...
Well, maybe we need to go back like it was with horse thieves. You know, should be the same with a car. If it's still someone's car, you should, and maybe not get the gallows, but maybe it should be a little stronger than slap on the hand.
Yeah. So I'm waiting for that next one to come down about dropping felony motor vehicle theft down to misdemeanor too, as well. So
well, we've seen an increase in that, and stolen vehicles has increased. Where we used to get about 1 or 2 a week, we get 1 or 2 a day now.
Oh yeah.
It's bad. We actually had one that drove here to pick their car up out of the impound. He drove here, hopped out. I got him on camera. This was great because I gave it to the law enforcement, but he got out, got paid his bill, gave identification, released his vehicle, left. But he left this other car in the parking lot. So we left it there for a few hours, and then the next morning I ran it through law enforcement. It was stolen. The guy stole the vehicle to come here to pick up a car, but it was cool. He left his ID and everything for law enforcement.
That's nice, yeah.
And they did nothing to him. You know, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Sounds like a story out of Florida, John. But to the point of like restitution and car theft and stuff, for the next meeting or sometime, it might be helpful to know like what the stats are, like how many of these vehicles are stolen and end up in, you know, a yard or whatever, just so we have a sense of what the numbers are compared to other types of tows and recovery. Because that, I mean, I've had my car, you know, broken into and rifled through, thankfully never stolen, but just that is such
Like, it just feels like the most personal violation. You know, how dare you, you big jerk. But you know, I live in Central Park, Denver, and you know, every week on Nextdoor or Facebook group, someone's talking about, oh, my car was stolen. Let me know if you saw anything, or does your camera have anything? And, you know, of course, it's pretty hard to catch the perpetrators, but occasionally a vehicle will get dumped in the neighborhood too, you know, but yeah, that's
Getting your car broken into, though, how does it feel that it's a server release ticket now?
ask me off camera. Although I might have grounded my 17-year-old for a week and made them do the dishes and all the chores when they left the car unlocked last month. You know better by now. It was interesting because they didn't even take like the cell phone charger, but the quarters were gone. The quarters were gone.
Yeah, they did that to my wife. They took her garage door opener and her manuals.
Yeah, see, they left the garage door opener behind, which I'm glad, but I was a little surprised. So maybe we got lucky and it was just some, you know, drunk teens or whatever. But yeah, no, I see that a lot in the neighborhood, and it just really sucks that you could be a victim of a property crime, which is bad enough, right? But then just to get your property back, there's a cost to that. You know, that's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Alright. Well, if nobody has anything else, I think we'll wrap up. I definitely appreciate everybody being here, and for those of you who stayed the whole time, definitely appreciate that. And then again, our next meeting is, I believe it's 3 weeks from today, 2 p.m. on Wednesday, April 13th.
Yep.
So keep that open. I haven't sent out the invite yet, but I will soon. I wanted to get past this meeting before I sent it out. So I will be sending that out soon. I'm sure we'll pre-circulate the agenda and the minutes from our last meeting. Obviously, there won't be any minutes from this meeting. This was just a informal Q&A, so nothing will be produced because of that. And of course, the recording will be posted up. So hopefully, the people in the group that were not available will be able to take a look at that and see some of our very witty banter. So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you in a few weeks.
All right. Y'all take care.
All right,
Bye.
thank you, everybody.